Can you hear me now?
Yeah, but it's breaking a bit. Can you just say something?
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Is this better?
Oh, there's a lot of background noise.
Sorry?
There's background noise. I think it's the fan. I'm not sure.
Okay. Background noise.
Nafia, we are in live.
Okay, thank you.
What about now, Nafisa? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Is the background noise?
Yeah, it's clear now.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Hey, bye.
Hi, Robin.
Hi. Hi, Umesh.
Hello.
Good, good. How are you?
Sorry, I'm just yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, yes. You're audible.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Nafisa, shall we start? There are some questions in the document, in the spreadsheet.
Oh, we can start.
Okay. Robin, should I start? The first couple of questions are from me.
Please, yeah, carry on.
Cool. All right. So I have a question from Anurag, which is according to the island biogeography graph, large islands far from the mainland have more species than small islands close to the mainland? Does this mean that area has a greater impact than distance from the mainland determining number of species? Um, Not necessarily. Um, the effect of the relative importance of area and isolation depends on multiple things. So, for example, if you have the mainland and then you have a set of islands, um, if you have species that are long distance dispersers from the mainland and are able to, let's say, fly large distances and colonize islands, then isolation is not as important because species are actually able to colonize islands that are more isolated. On the other hand, if you have species that cannot travel long distances, species that are set, let's say you're comparing two kinds of species, bats versus frogs, right? Bats are able to disperse over large distances, and therefore, when it comes to island biogeography for bats, and if you're looking at bat species richness with island size and isolation, perhaps isolation is not as important when it comes to bats. When it comes to frogs, however, because frogs are not very good dispersers, in that case, isolation becomes much more important than size, right? So it depends on what kind of species we're talking about, what those distances to the mainland are, and so on. So it doesn't necessarily mean that area has a greater impact than isolation. It actually depends on a number of factors, including what kind of species we're talking about. Um, Sorry, that was Akshay's question. Anurag's question is that the geographic range size of birds in the tropics, which have about 40% of the world's landmass, is smaller than in temperate zones, which is about 26% of the world's landmass. Isn't this because per bird area gets smaller in the tropics due to very high number of individual birds per bird species? I'll come to the follow-up to this, Anurag. Um, in fact, in the tropics, what you often see is that you don't have very high population densities or population sizes for species. Um, in the Amazon, for example, the population sizes of species are very low. It's not that you have a large, high number of individuals per species. You actually have a low number of individuals per species in the tropics. Um, so that so it's not because of that. The other thing is that it's true that the tropics have greater area than temperate regions, and that could be one reason for why there's more species in the tropics, because you have the species area relationship. And the species area relationship basically says that as area increases, the species richness also increases until it starts reaching a plateau. So the relationship between the log of area and the log of species richness is a straight line. And so as area increases, the number of species increases. So that could be one reason for why there are more species in the tropics. But in the tropics, generally compared to temperate areas, the number of individuals per species is low, not high. Um, the follow-up to that is that the physical range reduces due to high competitive pressure on fixed resources, that is land area, or the fact that all required resources are available in a small area. So certainly there is the hypothesis that what happens in the tropics is that you have a lower seasonality. A lower seasonality meaning that differences between summer and winter temperatures, for example, are much lower in the tropics than in temperate areas. So if you go towards the poles, for example, you can have an average summer temperature of 10 degrees Celsius and an average winter temperature of minus 40 degrees Celsius. Um, and so there's a 50 degrees Celsius difference between summer and winter. Whereas in the tropics, that difference might be 3 or 4 degrees Celsius. What that means is that resources are available year round in the tropics, whereas resources might be available only in summer in temperate areas near the poles. And so, what that means is uh, that because resources are available throughout the year in tropical areas, um, species are able to specialize on resources that are available throughout the year. And because species are able to specialize throughout on resources, they're able to avoid competition. The more specialized you become on a particular resource that nobody else is eating, the more you are able to avoid competition. So specialization in the tropics leads to the avoidance of competition, and therefore, what happens is that you have species coexistence in the tropics compared with the temperate areas. There's another question from Akshay, which is does species richness and rain size have any relationship? Temperate regions show larger range size, so why can't these regions support a larger number of species? So range size and species richness, there is a relationship in that you have more species in the tropics, and these species tend to have smaller range sizes. You have a fewer number of species in temperate areas, those species tend to have larger range sizes. But I don't think there's any causal relationship here between range size and species richness. The reasons for why we see more species in the tropics are not necessarily related to the range size. The range size is an outcome of the processes that generate higher species richness in the tropics. And so you've got in the tropics things like higher productivity, higher energy, low seasonality, refugia from glaciation, those kinds of processes that create high species richness. But that does not mean that automatically these species need to have that means that the outcome of those processes might have led to species having small ranges. If you have species with small ranges and you have multiple species with small ranges, then you can pack a larger number of species into a smaller area. Whereas if you go to the temperate regions where species have large ranges, then in a particular area you're not going to have a high number of species, right? Because the higher area, higher, larger, larger ranges means that you have species overlapping with each other. But because those ranges are large, the number of species that you can pack into a particular location is smaller than if you have species with small ranges where you can pack a large number of species into a particular location. So if you think of mountains, for example, you've got a mountain that looks like this. If you look at it from the top, it might occupy a very small area, let's say 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer for that particular mountain. But because you've got species with small ranges on those mountains, species that are found at low elevations, mid elevations, and so on, you can pack a large number of species onto that mountain. And so small ranges tend to have high species richness. Another question from Anurag is, in macroecology, we've discussed glaciation refugia. Now, during glaciation, some time period back, as birds' population are restricted to ice-free areas, don't they need to genetically differentiate to coexist in a smaller area? And could this not lead to more diversity? It's true that you would have to. It's true that you would have to differentiate in some way to be able to coexist. The two species that are pretty much using exactly the same resources are not going to be able to coexist. But the theory behind the glaciation refugium is that what you have is species with large ranges in interglacial periods when there's no glaciation. And then during periods of glaciation, these species that are already genetically differentiated and occupy larger ranges are then forced to retreat into smaller areas which are ice-free, which still have habitat. So it's not that these species will have to reach refugia and then genetically differentiate. It's probably more likely that they're already genetically differentiated, they're already distinct species, and then they retreat to glacial refugia during periods of glaciation. I have a question on Ashmole's hypothesis as against the latitudinal diversity gradient. So the Ashmole is related to clutch size in birds, right? So are likely to have higher clutch size. Sorry. So clutch size varies in proportion to the seasonality of the region, but that's at the local species level, right? That's you're looking at that. Ashmole's hypothesis saying that clutch size varies with latitude because tropical latitudes are less seasonal than temperate latitudes. But that's not got to do with species richness per se. So I don't think the latitudinal diversity gradient is particularly related to Ashmole's hypothesis. One final question, Robin. That is that here in South India, the number of birds is lower than in temperate North India. Why? Um, that's a great question. So South India, one is North Indian. So this is not true for all of North India, right? What's happening is that your higher species richness in North India is primarily because of the Himalayan range. And so you've got multiple species at different elevations in the Himalayas. And so that's what's contributing to to high biodiversity. And in general, mountains have higher biodiversity than flatlands or plain areas. Most of the southern peninsula is flat, and so the ability to pack species into a small area is lower because the available types of habitats are limited compared to when you look at the Himalayas. The Himalayas, you've got low elevations that are less seasonal, high elevations that are more seasonal. You've got a variety of habitats where different species can be packed into, and that's what leads to that high species richness. But if you look at South India, the Western Ghats, which is the mountain range on the west coast of India, it actually has a much higher number of species than the plains, than the adjoining plains. And so the decisive reason for why North India has more species is the presence of the Himalayas. Uh, okay, there's another question. When we speak of geographic range, do we include migration destination also? So we can speak of, when we talk about geographical ranges, we talk of, not all species are migratory. Many species are resident. And so their summer and winter ranges are the same. That is, they live in the same range throughout the year. When we talk about migrants, however, we make the distinction between breeding ranges and wintering ranges. So we can talk about the summer ranges, which are the breeding ranges of species, and then also talk about the wintering ranges of species. So if you go on to Birds of the World or you open any field guide, you look at the babblers, wobblers, chats, chats, robins, and so on, you'll see generally green as the breeding range and blue as the wintering range. Whereas if you look at most babbler species, there will be no distinction between the breeding and the wintering ranges. Robin, I think the rest of the questions are for you.
But didn't you just answer everything? There are more?
No. You've got this question, which is how are phylogenetic trees built, how are phylogenetic trees prepared, and then there's a
Wait a
question in the
second.
chat box, which is what exactly is the difference between allopatric speciation and that because of vicariance?
Hold on. I'm just trying to find the question.
I'll just paste it. So it's the last two in the chat box, Robin.
Okay. Yeah, so phylogenetic trees, it's actually very simple. Essentially, it's looking at shared traits. So it's basically it's an analysis of what are the traits that are similar. I mean, what is shared and what is different. And based on this, you kind of assign things to being closer or more distant. In the early days, the same thing could be done without genetic data. For example, with traits that are like, uh, yeah, you could think of various kinds of traits and morphological traits. And that's actually a slide in the lecture about this. What changed when there was just uh, morphology data and then genetic data came. So once the genetic data came, it's actually the basic premise of what is shared and different is the same, but it's just that there are hundreds of points of data because you are now talking about ATGC. So you can have you essentially you end up with a matrix. Let me see if we can do this whiteboard thing. Uh, can you see the uh, yeah, forget it. I mean, I think it doesn't seem to work so well. But essentially, there is a matrix of where each column is a trait, and there are different, let's say, species, and then you see what are the ones that are shared across the columns for every species, and you look at similarities and differences, and that is what is the at the core of the phylogenetic tree. But of course, there are various models in how the changes happen. Like can A go to a T and T go to a G and G go to a C and so on. So there's like a big probabilistic framework for calculating all of this. I think you don't need to worry about that because that's like a separate field of study altogether. Essentially, if you can understand that there are traits and looking at how the traits are shared, you kind of group them together. That's at the core of that. I hope that's clear. And allopatric speciation is fairly straightforward. Yes, there is a vicariant. The vicariance is that process which results in allopatric speciation. So it's not a separate thing in that sense. Yeah, they can that can happen together. Uh, Anything else?
I think I have a question here, which is what factors influence the geographic range and migration patterns of birds? Um, One of the important things that influence migration patterns is seasonality. You tend to find that species that live in highly seasonal habitats, high elevations towards the poles. These are habitats that have very large differences between summer and winter. Those species tend to be migratory. Um, and so low seasonality is associated with lower migratory behavior, high seasonality migratory behavior. The other thing is diet of birds. It tends to be that insectivores, species that eat invertebrates. Am I still there?
Yes, yes.
Okay, my screen seems to have frozen. Uh, you're muted, madam. You're muted.
Sir, from the beginning, you're not very clear. In comparison, Mr. Robbins' audio is clearer. I don't know why you're not clear today.
Oh, um, yeah, I don't know. Let me try rejoining.
Are there any more questions on biogeography while we wait? You can unmute as well in case you want to ask.
I'm Naveen Kumar. So I have one question relating to biogeography. So as Robbins has said, there is like uh, speciation happened in Sholakalis and laughing thrush from the north and south of Palgat Gap. So it is told that 5 million years they have been separated. So I couldn't get how that 5 million you have arrived.
Yeah.
Is it geographically or genetically?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like magic. It's a good question, Naveen. But there's a way of doing this. It's called, if you're listening to the part that I was saying, that where how there was a question about how phylogenetic trees are built. So the number of changes that happen in the different base pairs. There are ways to estimate how much time it may take. So you can reverse calculate this. So you can say, so one thing that you can do is what I was telling you is that look at how many changes there are to look at who's close to whom. Okay, so that's the simple part. The reverse way of thinking about this is that some smart people have figured out that if so much change is there, and usually there is a model which says this much time is what takes for so much difference to accumulate. This is so based on the amount of difference that is there, you can actually estimate how long back this could have been. Of course, these are very complicated models actually, which means that there are ways to kind of incorporate this. And then there are checks and balances. So if you have a phylogenetic tree and you know that there is a fossil or something like that at some point in your tree, there is an early bird some 20 million years back, somebody has dated it separately. So you place that in your phylogenetic tree, and you also have the data that is coming from what I was telling you, how many differences per 1% difference, let's say. Yeah, so that's how you arrive at that 5 million. So that it's actually not exactly 5 million. There's a range. So there's a mean and a standard deviation around that. So it's anywhere between that. And I think 5 million is closer to the mean, if I remember right.
Okay, thank you.
Does that
So
clarify? Yeah, yeah.
yeah, somewhat couldn't grasp completely. So
Yeah, it's a little bit dense, but you can say that if there is 2% difference in the genetic sequence, and you know that 2% difference accumulates, it takes 1 million years for that 2% of genetic sequence difference to accumulate in a specific gene, that is. So then you can kind of back calculate, right? If Sholikula in the north of Palghat and Sholikula in the south of Palghat have, uh, you know, 2%, 10% difference, then you can kind of estimate how many million years it is. A little bit clearer?
yeah, now it's clear.
Yeah.
But
So it has nothing to do with the geology. You can use the geology or the geography to triangulate that information to see if it makes sense. But usually you don't include that aspect into this calculation.
okay. I was about to ask one more question, but I think the
Sure.
answer is told. So like peregrine falcon is present in the entire world except Antarctica. So how
Mm.
everything comes under a subspecies rather than different species? So I am having very much confused on that.
Yeah, I mean, that's perfectly normal. I'm also still confused about this. Not about peregrine falcon, but in general about this idea. And if you think about it more broadly, actually, the entire idea of species and subspecies it's everything is a human concept. It's we are creating these boxes to say that something is a species and something is not a species. And if you think about it, it was, from the time of Linnaeus and all those people, right? These definitions and things were made hundreds of years back. And at that point, what they were doing was they were saying, here is, let's say, a specimen. And the way to kind of check if it is something, you have to actually have a real specimen, a dead organism, whether it is a plant or a bird or anything, and compare with what is called a type specimen, which means that that particular species is defined by this particular museum specimen. And you have to match one with the other and say, point A matches, point B matches, point C matches, and hence it is this species. So then you have one species, and then you have another species like that. But then some people said, well, it looks like this species, but there's a little bit of a difference. Like there's a little rufous color, which is what happened with Sholicola. There was a little rufous in the north of Palghat Gap. So they said, well, yeah, it seems like it's pretty much the Sholicola, but there's a little bit of rufous. So maybe we just call it subspecies. And then that became subspecies. So the question is, what is the data that goes into defining what is a species and what is a subspecies? And I think that is what you were asking, actually. And there is no hard rule for this. The truth is that these are cutoffs and, things that are made by humans, and our information, the data that we have has changed through time. So earlier it was something, and now we initially we had just Sanger sequencing, a little bit of genetic data. And I don't think you have done the molecular methods part. Nafisa, is that done yet? Would you know
Mm,
that module on molecular methods and tools?
no, no.
Not yet. Okay, yeah. So when you come to that part, you'll see how the the extent of data has actually changed. Now, it's a long answer, I know, but what I'm trying to say is that this question can be asked with various kinds of data. And it's not that the data will actually give you the answer, because the answer is still provided by humans, because we have to say how much difference is a particular species, how much difference is a subspecies. So, yeah, is that kind of clear?
Yeah, it is clear. So we define a specific set of difference that defines a species and subspecies, and
Yeah.
also genetic difference.
Yeah.
Currently,
So, yeah, so we had a golden age of genetic data where everybody was defining species just by the genetic data alone. But those days are over, because today everybody considers multiple lines of evidence. So you need to take the morphology into consideration, the measurements of different things, which is what primarily was used to describe these birds, plumage color, and then you add genetics as another component. And increasingly, acoustics has become a very big component as well, because birds actually recognize each other based on this. If you remember, there was this old concept of biological species concept, and there, the idea was that can two species kind of interbreed, and that people don't do that anymore, because there is something called speciation with gene flow these days. But you can use acoustic data to check if birds recognize each other from across, from different areas. So acoustic data is very important.
okay, thank
I
you.
hope that's clear. Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, Umesh. Yeah.
Yeah, he just messaged saying that his Wi-Fi is down, so he's requested if it's okay with you to answer the microecology questions as well.
Yeah. Sorry, what happened?
Umesh's Wi-Fi is down and he's unable to
Oh,
join, so he's
okay.
requested you to answer his questions.
Okay, okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah, go on. I'm not an expert, but I can try. Yeah. How much vocalization difference is there between the two Achilles? Um, Actually, that's what really got me started on Achilles because they were a subspecies when I started work on them. And one of the things that I noticed was the song was a little different. So the uh, the Nilgiri Sholakili has a shorter song than the white-bellied Sholakili. So I think that uh, it's an expert birder would not say that it's similar, but I think very naive birders, some people might think that they are similar. But I can say that they're more different than, let's say, some warblers or something like that. Is that a? I mean, statistically, they're different, but and the birds, if you play the song of one to the other, they don't respond. So the birds know it without any statistics, and we know it with statistics. But I don't know how you can't say anything more than that, I suppose. Yeah. Does that answer that?
Any more questions that any of you would like to ask? Oh, sorry, cut you off.
No problem.
No, like you said, the bird song, I found, I'm not sure, that everything the birds do are very much like humans. Like altruism was something like I would do all the time. I understood altruism when I was taught in the course. So the bird song, that Sholakili, like changing its song or whatever, it's something like different dialects, Punjabi, Marathi, Tamil, I don't know. I found it interesting, so I wanted to share. I mean, studying about birds, whether it is monogamy or how, like everything is like related to the way we behave. Like that's the thing. I'm not an expert, so this is what I took out of the course.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point you make. I would actually, urge you to think an alternate way, which is that humans are animals, and all animals have the same, set of, uh, some common things that happen across them. So we are
I
not
think
any different.
because I'm a doctor and I'm finding it difficult to understand birds. So we'd gone to a temple fair yesterday and there was so much food. So everyone went there. So when I'm trying to answer the questions, I'm thinking of Umesh telling in tropics there's rainfall and there's food and birds go where there's food and population increases where there's immigration into larger islands. Like it was, I mean, I'm not really understanding everything, but I'm finding it exciting because like you said, and we're animals, right? I agree. So it's the same things we do. Yes. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks.
Like today, I saw a lapwing on the neighbor's terrace. It was just sitting on some hay and it was sitting and it was obviously sitting on eggs. So definitely my understanding of bird watching has improved because of this course. And
Thank you.
because I'm a retired gynecologist and a teacher in a medical college, I like to tell every teacher thank you. So thank you, Robin.
Thank you, madam. Yeah, that's really nice.
My dad would be 98 if he was alive. So he had taught me about Salim Ali's Book of Birds. And he had taken me bird watching at 4 a.m. in Dehradun. So when I see some of the teachers saying they went to Dehradun, I get very excited. And he had a friend called George, who would also be 100 now, So that George uncle also would teach birds. And that time I didn't listen. So again, I'm saying like, thank you very much. I saw the paradise catcher in Dehradun and then I saw it in Manipal. And then I realized the birds move, right? Thank you again.
Thank you, madam. There are two more questions on the in the chat box. Can we use migration patterns and behaviors of birds as a model for optimizing human activities such as resource management? I mean, we don't have to go to birds for that. I think people have a lot of knowledge about what we should be doing. The question is, how do you get humans to modify some of these behaviors. Hello. Yeah. So the other question is the concept of range size is still a little confusing. Sorry, Deepa, I think your message kind of cut off. Can you just explain a little bit?
You can unmute as well if you want to clarify your question deeper.
Deepa, are you here? Yeah, I mean, it seems like a complex question, and anyway, Umesh would have been the person to answer it. So yeah, I'm kind of yeah, the part of the question that is missing is the most important part, so I can't really answer the question. But yeah, because range size has many implications, so it just depends on how you're. Any other questions?
Would any of you like to unmute and ask in case typing
One sec.
takes too long?
So, Dr. Robin, there was a question from week 5's assignment. I'm not sure if this is the right time to ask, or would you rather wait for the end?
Sorry, madam, I was getting a call, so I couldn't hear this. I was trying to cut that call. Could you
Oh,
just
sorry.
repeat what you were saying? Yeah, no.
Yeah, actually, there was a question from week 5's assignment that I had posted in the group. I needed a clarification, but I'm not sure if this is the right time. Would you rather wait for the end? Then I can ask later. No problem.
If nobody else has any questions, I mean, I'm happy to answer.
There's a question from Pranav. I'm gonna paste it here.
Okay, then I guess we'll wait for the end for later.
Sure, Archana. Yeah. Please do step in case I forget.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I see. The question is, what factors influence the geographic range and migration patterns of birds? Yeah, this seems like one of those really broad questions. Uh, yeah, I mean, I can get away by giving you a textbook answer, which is that a number of factors influence migration patterns and geographic range, which includes resources and breeding habitats and so on. But there are actually a lot more other things that are happening. There is some phylogenetic connections as well, since we are still we have some discussions on those lines. So species that are more related to each other tend to have similar kind of, let's say, behaviors, if you consider migration as a behavior. So you can have a whole group of birds which are migratory, not because it's very specifically just looking for resources, but it's because it's an ancestral trait that has kind of gone through all of those species. So I hope that's a little bit more nuanced than a textbook answer. Yeah, I don't know who asked that question. I hope that's clear.
Yeah, Pranav asked that question.
Yeah, Pranav.
Are there any more questions? You can even unmute in case you would like to ask. Hmm. There is a question.
Uh, I don't know where you guys are getting these questions because Commander Sanjay, this is a very broad question. Uh, Future research directions in uh, yeah, it's a tough question because actually most of what researchers do is that they take a small slice of a small question and then they try to answer it. I think that some of the work that Umesh does, if you can look up his website, that is pretty much, I think, the future of where a lot of the ornithology research is heading towards, which is trying to understand how climate change impacts species, but not just very broadly, but more specifically, how the numbers of individuals, how the survival rate of species, how the community, entire communities are getting impacted by that. So I think that is probably one of the most crucial kinds of research that is being done today. Uh, yeah. Uh, I hope that's clear, Commander Sanjay. But I can probably add saying that, probably every one of Umesh's students are probably looking at, finer slices of that. They're probably trying to see, maybe one person's trying to look at how the food resources are being affected, and how that actually impacts things. So I think there's a lot of different things that are happening. Ecologists look at things very differently. There are physiologists, people who work on the bird physiology, who are basically trying to understand these things. But eventually, it kind of connects back to these large processes. I saw this question which has then disappeared, which is, where are the Shulakilis? I don't see the question anymore.
I'll try find.
Yeah. So yeah, since I remember the question, I can just answer that. I think it was from Aditya. The Shulakilis are found only in the mountain tops of the Western Ghats. Yeah, there it is. Yeah. Uh, they are suffering from habitat loss. It's unclear. I think that I don't think we have enough data to say that there is so much habitat loss that's impacting the Shulakilis. I think they're doing okay, actually. Uh, Chaitanya, it's a good question that you did this course out of curiosity. How can I make use of this knowledge? I think there's a lot that can be done with, that's the beauty of ornithology, right? A lot of contributions have been made by just observations. If you just take this one module that we are discussing right now, biogeography, and some of the questions that were asked earlier, which was about subspecies. We have a lot of subspecies described in India, and I don't think we very clearly understand what are the boundaries of those subspecies. Where does one subspecies end? Where does the other subspecies start? And how often do you find one subspecies in the other subspecies range? And I think that um, uh, some of these things can be answered very easily just by simple observations, but you're contributing to something much larger, which is to understand the biodiversity, very broadly of India. So I think Chaitanya, there's a lot of careful observations that can be made with just eBird and the knowledge that you have, and it'll change the way we understand some of the birds in our backyards as well. So I would encourage you to kind of, look at Birds of the World website at Cornell, and they have listed very nicely all the subspecies, and look for the subspecies that are supposed to be around your house, wherever you are. And I think that would be very valuable information to just tag that you actually saw a specific, subspecies, not something else. Aditya, yeah, so good point. So 24 years back, when I started work on the Sholakili, everybody said that it's very rare, you won't see it. And that is largely, so there were researchers who had spent like, decades working in the Western Ghats and had not seen the Sholakili. It was called short-wing then. And but then we could find it. The trick is to understand the ecology of the species. So this is a skulking bird. It's very difficult to see in the dense shola. So if you know the call, that's one way to find it. And that's how I found it. And it's actually the most common understory bird in Munnar. So if you were to put mist nets out, this would be the most common bird. But if you go out bird watching, it won't be, because it's very silent. So it's just the ecology of the bird that's like that. One of the great places to see this bird is Rajamalai. So if you've been to Rajamalai in Munnar, there's a little stream like thing that's there near the checkpost. So you can often see these Sholakilis there in that place. So it's not that they are not there. It's just that they are different. They are not difficult to see. Also, you just need to kind of find a specific way of looking for them. I hope that's clear. Actually, my team is currently, I have students who are currently in Munnar, working on this bird. So they're there. Don't worry. Rajamalai, which is, the Arabiculum. Actually, you find any shola. You go to Munnar, find any shola. There's always a shola kili in it. The thing is not to look for it at the edges, because you'll find, there's usually a lot of, it's very thick, so you may not see it. Or if you are at the edge, look for it early morning at dawn, early morning or around dusk when they come out. Yeah, you'll find them. It's not difficult. Yeah, Pranav, a good question. Interest in ecology, ornithology. You're a student of ICER. Yeah, you can get in touch. I mean, I get a lot of messages and requests. And I think the problem for us is that we are a small team and we generally don't take interns because it's a lot of work. So I would suggest that, like kind of build on some of the skills that you have. and then apply for an internship. And that is usually a little bit better. Yeah, but anyway, please feel free to reach out. Any other questions? Otherwise, we can take Archana's question.
Yeah. The questions that she wanted to ask were clarifications on like 2 of your assignment questions.
I see.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
if there are any other questions from this week's lecture, then feel free to just type in because almost 6 as well.
otherwise, go ahead, Archana.
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I'm bringing this up, Dr. Robin, but I
Uh-huh.
was really trying to understand the answer because it completely threw me off. So I figured the best way was to check with you.
Yeah,
So there are 2 questions, one of which was about, can I just read out the question? Is that okay?
sure. Yeah.
Okay, so it says, which parts of the frequency range of a bird song
Mhm.
are likely to get impacted by anthropogenic noise?
Mhm.
The way I understood from your lecture and from reading Handbook of Bird Biology was that the higher frequency or peak frequency goes higher, like in
Mhm.
response to urban noise, is the way I understood this.
Mhm.
But the answer seems to have been lower frequency is impacted.
Mm.
So then I got confused.
Yeah, I think it's sorry, it's probably a perspective issue because what happens is that so you have, let's say, a spectrogram that is like this, and you have time
Yes.
and frequency. Now, a lot of the urban noise is actually lower frequency. And you can kind of look at all these car sounds and human sounds. Everything is low frequency. Birds are usually higher frequency. Now, what happens is that there is an overlap of this low frequency sound with that of a bird sound. So it's
Okay.
true that what birds do is that they shift the frequency up. But that is because the lower frequency is getting impacted. So they are shifting it up. So in some sense, your understanding of the interpretation of the outcome, you're right. But what is the driver of it is that it's the low frequency that is actually pushing it up.
Okay, I understand now. Because
Yeah.
when I first read it, it seemed like I was interpreting English, and then I said, no,
Yeah.
I should not think about it like English. But then
Yeah.
the answer
No.
seemed to be
Yeah.
English-based, then I got completely confused.
Yeah. Sorry. I mean, I think maybe we'll frame it a little better, but yeah. But I hope
Okay.
you understood
No.
the
Yes, I did. Thank you.
actual.
Because there was also a graph that you had shown in your slide with respect to the vehicular noise that you just referred to.
Yeah.
So when I think back to that, this does what you're saying. I can relate that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah. Well.
And similarly, the question, and this, I think this specific point you had not covered in the talk, but Nafisa was kind enough to share another lecture of yours, which had details about this. So this is about sampling rate.
Yeah. I remember that Nafisa reached out to me to ask me about that. But yeah, I seem to have missed that. I don't know how that got missed, but I hope you understand the idea
No, but
though, which is
no, then I got confused because of the answer again. Sorry, which is why I'm bringing it up. So the
Sure.
question was, what should be the sampling rate to capture a song that falls between 4 to 6 kilohertz?
Yeah.
And from your other video, I understood that we typically the thumb rule is twice of the.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
then to me in my mind, the answer should have been somewhere between 8 to 12. Because
Okay.
we are discussing 4 to 6.
Yeah. Maybe. Yeah. What was the answer?
14. So then I was like, okay, now this math is not working for me.
Oh, I see. So I think that may also be due to the settings that are there in Recorder. So I may have been kind of taking some of the things as a practical this thing, but that's my bad actually. So in when you're setting these things on when you're recording, there are only a few stops that are there.
Okay.
So my guess is that I took the answer from that. But I should have actually just taken the absolute answer, which is what you're talking about. So it's
No, so the other option was 10. So,
mm,
I mean, in the options.
yeah. So I think that usually you take more than twice, twice or a
Okay.
little more.
Okay.
I mean, that's a practical thing that we do. But yeah, just so you know, I mean, we'll again revisit the answer thing, and I think we have to kind of either delete or insert the content
No,
appropriately for the next round.
right. So just to understand what you do in practice is, so if you record at a higher frequency, then would you not have to scale it down later?
No, you don't. No, you don't. You can use much more. It's just unnecessary because it's a
Okay.
lot of it's just consuming a lot of data, but you don't
Right.
need it. Like for example, if you're working with bats or something like that, you would actually have much
Need
larger
higher. Yes.
this thing. But where you don't do it. You just go with the bird frequency thing when
And
you're
you
working.
studied at the same scale that you recorded. Sorry, at the same frequency that you recorded.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you need to have everything comparable. That's correct.
Right. Yes. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. Oh, and
Yeah.
while we are at it, I think this week, again, something threw me off, but I'm sorry I'm bringing this up. Please do not mind.
No problem.
In your slide on, sorry, just on iconic effect. Oh, sorry, not iconic effect. There's a study of babblers and murid rodents.
Sure.
I think there's an error on the screen. The text on the screen, I think, says decreasing from west to east, whereas everything else, the map, what you pointed to in your lecture, the red arrow that you drew, everything else says east to west.
Mm, what can you say that again, please?
I'll say that again.
Yeah.
There were these graphs that you had shown, I think from Dr. Umesh's study
Okay.
of babblers and
Yeah. I got it. Murid
murid
rodents.
rodents.
Yeah, I know the paper now. Yeah.
The species richness in eastern Himalayas versus west.
Yeah.
So the map, the graph, what you were saying, the way you pointed, everything said is all saying east to west, but the text on screen unfortunately says west to east.
Oh yeah, that's just probably a mistake. You mean it's
Yeah,
is it the text on screen which is in the
yeah.
slide? In the slide?
Yes,
Oh,
in the
that's
slide.
just a mistake. Yeah, sorry. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's east to west.
Yeah, so in case you're using it in future, I just thought I'd
Yeah. Thanks.
since you are
I'll
here,
have
like,
Nafisa tag that. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.
yeah. Thank you for your answers. Now I'm
Yeah.
at peace because I was like, I'm not understanding why.
Yeah. Sure.
Thank you, Dr. Ravi.
Yeah, thank you. So Nafisa is 6. Can we?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Archana, for bringing that up. We'll
Yes.
look into.
And thanks, Nafisa. We can close those.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Bye.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Hope to
Thank you
catch
for
you
your
next.
time, Robin.
Yeah. Thanks, Nafisa. Yeah. Bye.
Bye-bye.